This is the 2003 J. O'Higgins question. So what are we doing here? So let's look at the question sheet. This is what we're given. We have information at the beginning of the year. These are 5 different areas of notes, and the last one includes information at the end of the year. For this incomplete, it's the balance sheet method, the second style of incomplete question. We have to get the balance sheet before we get the trading profit and loss. And the reason we have to do that is because gross profit is 40% of sales. We don't know sales and we don't know purchases, so we're incapable of answering the trading profit and loss at the beginning of the questions. We have to do out the notes, start with the balance sheet, and then find our trading profit and loss figures. So let's start from the top. We'll start with goodwill, because we're told that we lodged 350,000 to a business bank account and we purchased the business for 320,000. So if I lodge money to a business bank, that's capital, and I purchased the building for business for 320. So the business purchasing price was 320,000. How much was it worth? Well, if we find here, the assets all added together add up to 341,600, and the liabilities adds up to 61,600. So what happens here is that the business actually had a net worth of 280,000, but we paid 320,000 for it. And the reason we did that is because of goodwill. And goodwill is an intangible fixed asset. It's additional money that we'll pay for purchasing a business, generally due to things like the business's brand, increasing the value of what the business's worth would be. So we paid 320 for a business, and again we found the business was worth 280 because that is the assets minus liabilities. 320 minus 280 is 40,000. That is our balance sheet figure for goodwill. That's intangible fixed asset. If I look at the top of the question, the next figure that I can, or the next note that I can get is rates. I'm told that we had prepaid 3 months of rates. So in my rates account, I can see that obviously I've prepaid an expense. Therefore, that would be an asset at the beginning of the year, 2,400. And later on in the year, we paid for 12 months rates, 10,800. So it'd be money out of my bank account, credit side of my bank, debit side here. So I paid for 3 months already, and during the year I paid for an additional 12 months. So I've paid a total of 13,200 for my rates. How much of that goes to this year, and how much of it was prepaid for next year? Well, let's find my P&L figure for this year first. So how much of all of this was my rates payable for this year, 2003, sorry. So for 2003, how do we find the amount that I owed for rates? Well, it's the first 3 months, 2,400, plus the next 9 months here. That's my rates for 2003 for that year. So 2,400 plus 9 of the 12 here, because then I'll have my first 12 months. So 10,800 multiplied by 9 divided by 12, and I add up the 2,400 plus the figure that I get here. That gives me 10,500. So 10,500, and that's, as I said, it's going to be equal to my 2,400 plus my 8,100 that I would have gotten from multiplying this out. That's my figure for this year for rates, so that's my expense. The remaining amount is January, February, and March of 2003 of next year, and that is going to be the remainder. So the balance on both sides is 13,200. I know that 10,500 was the amount of rates for this year, therefore 2,700 is the difference, and that is the rates prepaid for next year. So that's just the missing figure after I get the balance on both sides, and that'll be my balance brought down here. So that's my current asset there. I'm not going to look at drawings yet. We'll get back to that. The next thing I'll look at is the investment fund. We're told a little bit about drawings, so we can look at the beginning of drawings. Well, we're working our way down from the top of the question. Let's look at the beginning of drawings, because we're told that each week Higgins took from stock of goods to the value of 100. So each week we took 100 out of our stock, and we took 150 out of our cash, and we used these for our household. So this is drawings. So for my purchases, I took from stock, so I took from my purchases. Every week I took 100 euros, that's 5,200. I took out of purchases and I put into drawings. And for cash, I took out 150 euro for each of those weeks, giving me 7,800 that I've taken out of cash and added to drawings. So I'm going to show them on the debit side of the drawings account. If we go down here to my investment fund, so we'll come back to drawings after. If we look at investment fund now, we can see that we took out a loan of 300,000 and we would agree to pay back the loan 6% interest on the last day of each month. So that was paying back the interest in the loan. What about repaying the loan itself? The capital sum, the 300,000, was to be repaid in one lump sum. We're repaying it all in the year 2010, which is 80 years away, which doesn't really matter too much to us now, but all we know is that we're repaying it in the future. In order to do that, the bank is going to transfer €2,500 out of the bank account at the end of every month into an investment fund. So at the end of every month, 2,500 is going to be transferred out from the business bank account into an investment fund. So I want to find out how much money was transferred out of the investment fund this year, or transferred out of the bank this year and into the investment fund. Well, how many times did I take out the 2,500? Well, when did we take the loan out? We took the loan out the 1st of October. And remember, this is the last day of every month. So how many months did we have in 2002 where we took out €2,500? And we're showing this here in our investment fund account. How much money did we put into the investment fund? Well, I had 3 months. I had the end of October, the end of November, and the end of December. Those 3 months, for all those 3 months, I took out 2,500 from the bank and put into the investment fund. So to calculate how much money is in the investment fund at the end of 2002, I have my 2,500 a month multiplied by 3 months is 7,500, and that's the money that I invested. I also have €75 interest that I've earned. So that's a P&L figure. It's basically our income figure. We're going to add it as gains for the year, and it's €75. So at the end of the year, how much money do I have in my investment fund? I have the amount that I've invested and I have the interest that I've earned. So balance on both sides, and I can find my balance carried down and balance brought down figure of 7,575. So €7,575 is how much money I have in my investment fund at the end of the year, and that will be my financial fixed asset figure. The 75 is interest I've earned, so that is P&L. That's my investment fund done. So I can move on from that to look at loan interest. So for the loan, what happened? Well, I borrowed 300 grand, and I borrowed the 300,000, and I have to repay it back at 6% interest per year. So how much interest did I have to pay this year? Well, we also can't forget that the loan was only taken out on the 1st of October, which means for this year I only had the loan for October, November and December. So the loan is 300,000, the interest is 6%, but I only had it for 3 months of the year. So I'm not taking a full 6% interest. I'm going to get 3 out of 12 months. It's 300,000 by 6% by 3 divided by 12 gives me 4,500, and that is my loan interest for the year. That's how much loan interest that I owed for the year. So how do I show that? Well, that would normally be my P&L figure. I would normally put all of that into P&L, but we're told that 25% of interest payable is for the private section of the business. So 25% of this is for the private section, which is drawings, and the other 75% will stay within the business as an expense. So this 4,500 is again my interest payable for the year, which we worked out already, and we have to look at this and say, now, well, 25% of this is going to drawings, so this is that here, 4,500 by 25%, 1,125. The other 75% is my expense. So my 4,500 by 75% gives me 3,375. So that's my expense for loan interest for the year. That's the amount that I owe. That's the payable amount for the full loan by the percent by the months of this year. And again, just 75% of this is P&L, 25% is drawings. So what else can I look at for my interest? Well, I actually can see here that I paid off interest. I paid out of my business bank account €3,000 to pay off interest. So I've paid €3,000 interest this year. I owed 4,500. Therefore, I still owe 1,500. Because I owe 4,500, that's the amount that's payable for the year. That's why I broke it down on the credit side. I've only paid off 3 grand of it, therefore there's 1,500 that I still owe at the end of the year. That is a current liability. So I have my expense figure and I have my current liability figure. This drawings figure I have here, I can put that into the drawings account, 1125. I can now add that to the drawings account here on the opposite side and the debit side. So now I have 1, 2, 3 figure in my drawings account. The next thing I'm looking at is the loan repayment. Quite simply, I actually got a loan for 300 grand and I'm not going to repay it until 2010. So all of it is going to go in as a finance by you. It's not necessary to do this up as a note, but it is important to remember to add this into my balance sheet because I owe 300 grand at the end of the year. Buildings is quite short as well. My buildings at the beginning of the year were 290,000, and we can see here that we purchased buildings for 250. So my 290 is my balance at the beginning of the year, and again 250,000 I bought more buildings. So at the end of the year I have 540,000 in buildings, and that's a fixed asset for buildings at the end of the year. My light and heat, well, at the start of the question I'm not told anything on light and heat. I am told here though during the question that I paid 7,200 out of my bank account for light and heat. So that'd be in the credit side of my bank account, and the debit side here 7,200. Apart from that, we have a little bit of information at the bottom. We're told that my electricity due at the end of the year was 560, so that's a liability. It's money that I owe next year. So there'll be a balance carried down here on the debit side, and there'll be a balance brought down here on the credit side at the end of the year for next year. So that's my current liability. It's the electricity I owe next year. So what else happens for my light and heat? Well, I paid off 7,200 and I used electricity of 560 that I've yet to pay, so that's a current liability. So that means I've used 7,760 euro of electricity, or of light and heat. That's my balance here on the debit side. It's everything here. I don't have any heating oil at the start of the year or anything like that, so the only other thing I'm told in the question is that 25% of light and heat used was for the private section of the business. Again, I've paid this and I've ended up using an additional 560 euro in electricity that I haven't paid for yet. So I've used 7,760 euro for light and heat, and 25% of what I used should be drawings. So quite simply, all we do is take our used figure 7760, get 25% of it and put it to drawings, and get the remaining 7760 by 75%, and that goes in as my normal expense figure. My 5820, 75%, that is my expense figure for light and heat. And this drawings figure, just like we did above, I can take this figure now and put it on the debit side of my drawings account, and you can see up here I can add in my light and heat figure. So I now have purchases, cash, light and heat, and interest in my drawings account. The last, I believe, last two notes that we have here in the question, first one here is on equipment. So let's look at the question. There was nothing to do with equipment at the beginning of the year. During the year, we purchased equipment for 16,000 euro. So I bought equipment for 16,000 euro during the year. We're told, where are we told again for the, yes, down here. So 25% of equipment is for private use. So 25% of equipment was used by the, again, for private use, so for drawings. So my equipment that I paid for is 16,000. I'm going to show that then on the debit side. And I've 25% of it was for private use. So 25% of it again is drawings. And obviously the remaining 16,000 by 75%. And that is going to be my balance at the end of the year. That's my balance carried down. My balance at the end of the year, 12,000, it's a fixed asset, is the equipment that I had at the end of the year, and that's obviously going towards my balance sheet, fixed assets. I have another drawings figure. I can take this 4,000 and I can put it in on the debit side of my drawings account, 4,000. The last note is to do with college fees, so let's look at the question again. I can see from the question that I'm told that I paid college fees of 4,500, and we can see that during the question here, we're told that Higgins estimates that 70% of college fees is for a private family member and the remainder to an employee. So 70% of college fees is for a family member. So the college fees is money out of bank, so it's the credit side of bank, and I'm going to put it in the debit side of the college fees account here, bank, 4,500. 70% of it was for drawings. So let's get 4,500 by 70%, and again let's call that drawings. The rest of it was to an employee, which makes it wages. So wages here is 1,350. It's not going to be a balance carried down or a P&L figure because it's actually to do with my wages account. It's money that I paid for wages. Again, just before I look at wages, I have my drawings figure for college fees, and I'm going to put that up here. College fees, I now have all of my drawings dealt with. So my balance on both sides is 23,215. Balance carried down here, 23,215, and that's my balance brought down. I can go back now to do the final note of the question. Final note of the question is for wages, and we're told that wages at the beginning of the year is 3,600, which again I owe, it's a liability, it's an expense due. It's on the credit side. I know that I've paid for wages and general expenses, I paid 98,000, that'll be the credit side of my bank account, and the debit side here, 98,000. So I've dealt with those two figures at the top. I've also found that I took 1,350 out of my college fees and into wages, so I can put this on the debit side here. And just to finish off my wages account, I have those two figures on the debit side giving me 99,350, and I have one figure here on the credit side, so the difference is going to be P&L of 95,750. So that 95,750 is my P&L figure for wages. Now, at the bottom of the question, we're told that we need to do a balance sheet showing O'Higgins' profit and loss for the year, and we need to then finish that up with a trading profit and loss. So I'm just going to get into the balance sheet in 1 second. So, for the balance sheet, as normal, we'll start off the balance sheet where intangible fixed assets. So my intangible fixed assets, which I've gotten from goodwill at the top of the question, was 40,000. So we took that goodwill figure up here, and obviously that's my first fixed asset, it's my intangible fixed asset, and I've put that in. The next part of fixed assets is my tangible fixed assets. And what I'm looking at here is my buildings and equipment. Buildings were 540,000 from my buildings account, and from my equipment account 540,000 fixed asset, and from my equipment account we had 12,000 once we took out the drawings. So 12,000 there for equipment. So I can show both of those here under the cost. There was no depreciation, so they are the net book value figures. If I add up these three figures, I find that there's 592,000 in fixed assets so far. The last fixed asset we had is financial fixed assets, and usually to go here we'd have building societies or investments. If we look at the question here, I can see that we had a note on investments, and we had €7,575 put into our investment fund. So we'll take this figure here and we'll add this to my investments. My investments again here, 7,575. So I've added that in as well. It's another fixed asset, so I'll add it onto the 592. And at the end here, I can find that I've total fixed assets of 599,575. So again, all I've done here is just adding up my fixed assets that we've worked out from the notes. All of these figures were worked out in the notes. The next thing I'm going to do is find my current assets. So for current assets, it makes sense to, most of these here are gotten actually from the question itself. In fact, if we look at the first three, we'll find that we have closing stock of the year of 17,200. We have debtors of 34,300, and we have cash at bank of 68,462. They're all assets at the end of the year. They're all current assets, so we'll just include those because we have not adjusted any of them. The only other thing we'll find from our question, if we look down here for any balance brought down for current asset, is in our second note we had looked at. There was nothing for light and heat. There was no stock at the end of the year. Sometimes there is, so I've left that there. We've done a rates for our second question. We found that we prepaid an expense. We prepaid 3 months rates for next year of €2,700. So that was a short-term asset. So I'm going to show that as well under current assets. So let's go back to my balance sheet. Under current assets here I have a fourth one, and it's 2,700. If I add up my 4 current assets, it gives me 122,662. That's the total amount I have in my current assets. Creditors, amounts falling due within 1 year, is my next heading. And for that, I'm going to look here at the bottom and find what are my creditors. I can see here that I have trade creditors of 29,900, and I also have electricity due of 560. So from the question, I know I haven't adjusted those two figures, so I can put them in as we see them. Those two figures gotten from the bottom of the question. What else do I have in short-term liabilities? Well, let's look up through the notes. Is there any balance brought down here that goes to our current liabilities? So let's look up through the notes, and we can see that if we look at loan interest, this 560 is our electricity. So again, we've inputted that already, so we won't input that again. If we look here at loan interest, we can see that there's 1,500 that we still owe, because it was 4,500 that we owed and we only paid 3,000. So there's 1,500 that we still owe from loan interest, and there was no other notes giving us a short-term liability because there was nothing owed in the short term for loan repayment. So my loan interest is the only one to add to that here. And again, I had 0 in for loan interest due, because sometimes that can come up if I have a repayment to make in the next year for loan interest, but not for this question. So those 3 figures is all I have for creditors amounts due within 1 year. If I add the 3 of those up, it gives me 31,960. That's my total creditors within 1 year, so it's a negative figure. My total current assets here is 122,000, so let's have 122,662 minus 31,960 gives me a working capital of just over 90,000. My working capital is here. This is my total fixed assets. Let's add these two together, and it gives me my net assets. My net assets is 960,277. So we just added these two figures there. Just to finish off the balance sheet, there's not that much left, but it takes a little bit of understanding just to finish the balance sheet, because remember, for this question, it's the only time where we start with the balance sheet and then have to work out the P&L. So again, as normal, we start off with my creditors that I owe in the long run. It's your loan or debentures goes here. So for my loan, if I look up at my loan here, we can see that for my loan account, I had looked at the fact that I owe 300,000, and it's all owed in the long run because I'm not paying it back until 2010. So it's a long-term creditor. It's money I owe in the long run, and it's 300,000, and that's going in there under my finance buy for creditors amounts due after 1 year. My next heading is capital and reserves. What usually goes here? Well, any money invested in the business. And at the beginning of the year, we lodged 350,000 into the business. So therefore, my capital at the beginning of the year was 350,000. It's money lodged into the business. Did I lodge any other money into the business? Well, if I look through the question here, we can see that we would have introduced dividends as well. During the year, O'Higgins lodged dividends of 2,500. So O'Higgins lodged more capital into the business. They introduced more capital into the business. So this next one is capital introduced. It's dividends, more money invested by the business owners. So that's more capital, 2,500. So both of those figures are in here. What else goes in the finance buy? Well, usually we'll add net profit, but I don't know what my net profit is. So all I can do here now is go back and see that the only other thing that I have is drawings, which is also finance buy figure. My finance buy is usually credit figures, but drawings is here on the debit side, so I take it away as I normally do for drawings. I take away drawings at the end of the year, so less drawings of 23,215, and two of these figures added up minus my drawings gives me 329,285. If I add now my loan that I owe plus all the capital and reserves, there's 629,285. So I've worked out my finance buy down to a total of 629,285. But I know that I haven't been able to work out my net profit. So how could I work out my net profit? For the balance sheet, we know that, as usual, it's supposed to balance. So providing I've done everything right here, This is my balance up at the top, 690,277. Therefore, it should be the same balance down here. So let's put this in as my balance at the end. Now can I find out my net profit? So if I put in the balance that I get above here, down at the bottom, and I know that my finance buy was already worked up to 629,285. Let's just check the difference. So the difference between both of those is what I'm going to call my net profit, because I'm just basically assuming now that the difference between this and this, providing I've done everything right, is going to be my net profit. It's the money that I made this year. That's 60,992. So unlike any other question that we've done balance sheet, we're going to work everything out, get to this last figure, and then just put in the balance from above here. And then obviously the difference between what we had worked out and the balance from above will be the net profit. So I have my net profit now. And now, because I have my net profit, now I can start looking at doing my trading profit and loss account. So for my trading profit and loss account, if we look here again, just to fill out the headings at the top, I'd normally start my trading profit and loss account with my sales. I'm just going to do this first. So sales would be normally where I'd start. I'm going to try to show this here. So I'd normally start with sales. But for this question, I put it in bold because it's something here that is quite important. For this question, we're told that gross profit was 40% of sales. So gross profit's only equal to 40% of sales. So therefore, if I divide gross profit by 40, multiply by 100, that'll be my sales figure. The problem is I don't know what my gross profit is. So I can't work out my sales. So this is an unknown figure. I'm not sure what it is. So let's work through the rest of the question. Let's fill in what we have. So the next thing we have here is my less cost of sales heading. And as normal, we'd put in opening stock. Do I know my opening stock? I do. At the top of the question, my opening stock is 16,700. So let's put that in there. It's my opening stock. Then we're told we have purchases. Now for this question here, my purchases are 200, we're not going to go into detail, sorry. Our first question here, my purchases are unknown. So for my purchases here, I can't show them. I can only just highlight this here. I've shown the purchases adjustments for the rest of this, so I'm not going to highlight that yet. I don't know my purchases. I don't have any note showing me how to find them, nor do I know my sales. So they're blank so far. If I don't know my purchases, I don't know this figure. Therefore, I can't add the two of these together and work out my cost of goods available for sale. What comes after that? Well, usually we would have our closing stock. So our closing stock is usually the next thing we can include. Now, can I include my closing stock? Yes, I can. At the bottom of the question, we're told closing stock. Again, make sure it doesn't include heating oil. 17,200. 17,200. Closing stock is obviously as normal. We're taking it away from my cost of goods available for sale. So I don't know what this figure is, so I can't take away the 17,200. So I don't know what my cost of sales is going to be. But I know that it's called cost of sales. I just don't know what the figure is going to be. And after that, I would usually have my sales. I would take away my cost of sales and I would get my gross profit. Again, I can't work out my gross profit, so I don't know what my gross profit is going to be. After that, so again, so far we've noticed that we can't work out sales, purchases, or gross profit. But we can work out the rest of the question, and then let's work our way up. So after that, we usually take away our expenses and add our gains. So let's look at adding any gains first. Did I have anything in the P&L or from my notes that was a P&L figure for income this year? And I had one. On the debit side for P&L, I had €75 for interest that I had earned from the investment fund. So we're looking through the notes for anything to do with P&L on the debit side, and it's money that I made this year. It's additional income, and it's €75. So it's additional money that I made. So I'm going to add that €75 on now for add gains. So let's blacken that out here. I don't know what my gross profit is, but I know when I get my gross profit, if I add 75, I'll have additional gross profit after adding gains. Because I don't know what my gross profit is, I can't work out what this figure will be. but I know that I'll add gains to it. The next thing I do is take away my expenses. As normal, I look through my question and look through my notes here to find anything on the credit side. That's my P&L figure. And I have one here for wages, 95,750. I have another one here for light and heat, 5,820. I'm going to have another one up here for loan interest, 3,375. I should have one more up here for rates for 10,500. So those four figures were all on the credit side. They're all expense figures, and I know all of them. So I can include all of them under expenses, put all the figures in, and they're all my expenses. There's nothing else in the question that we had yet to adjust because college fees, remember, was included in wages. So I have all my expenses, so I can total those up. And I can find that my total expenses came to 115,445. That's my total expenses. So how do I finish the question? Well, usually we'd start from the start and work our way down to get the net profit. But in this question, we already know from guessing what our net profit is. So our net profit we had guessed to be 60,992 being our net profit. 60,992. Let's put this in here for our profit at the end and see can we work our way back up. So if this is my net profit and this was the expenses, how would I get the figure for net profit before expenses? So before I took away the expenses, what would this figure be? In order to work our way back up, all we do is look at this sign and do the opposite. So to work our way down, we take this figure and minus expenses. To work our way up, let's just add expenses. So 60,000 plus the expenses, 115, is going to give me this figure. It's my net profit before I took away my expenses. Let's work our way up again. This is an add figure for investment. So usually I take this figure and I'd add investments and I get 176,437. So let's do the opposite. Let's take this figure away now and work our way up. So 176,437 minus 75, and I work my way up. 176,362. And just so that you can double check it, all you do to double check to see if you're right is just look at it normally now. This figure plus this figure should be equal to this. And this figure plus minus this figure should be equal to this, and all of that is true, so therefore we know that we're okay so far. So what do we do so far, or what do we do next? Well, now we've worked our way up to gross profit, and we don't know how to figure out these last few figures, but we can do one thing. We can look at our gross profit here as being worth 40% of sales, and from that we should be able to work out what sales is. So my gross profit is 176,362. So it is 176,362. We're told that that should be equal to 40% of sales. So let's divide this by 40% and multiply it by 100%. So divide it by 40, multiplying it by 100, and that should tell us what sales is, because we're told again that this is 40% of the sales figure. So once I divide that by 40, multiply by 100, I get 440,905. Now that's my sales figure. Now we can work more out. I know my sales, I don't know my cost of sales, but I know I'd usually take it away, and I would get 176,362. So let's do the opposite. Let's try to work our way back up now. How would we get from 440,905 down to 176,362? I would have had to take away my cost of sales. So let's find the difference between these two figures, and that'll be the amount that I took away. 440,905 minus 176,362 is going to give me the figure that I would have taken away, and that's my cost of sales. Again, at the end of this, double check to see does it make sense. 440,905 minus 264,543 should be equal to 176,362, and it is. So again, I have that correct. If I work my way back up again here, I know that I took away closing stock from my cost of goods available for sale. So this should be my cost of goods available for sale figure. So I took away closing stock from this guy, and it would have gotten me 264,543. Let's ignore the fact that it's a minus figure. That's how much the cost of sales would have been. So instead of looking at taking away closing stock from this guy, let's put these two together. And 17,200 plus 264,543 will be equal to my net cost of goods available for sales figure. And again, always double check. Does it make sense? 281,743 minus 17,200, that's equal to that. So again, that makes sense. The last thing we can do to work this out is we have our cost of goods available for sale, but we don't have purchases, but we do have opening stock. So again, how did I get from opening stock plus this figure to get cost of goods available for sale? I find the difference between 281,743 and 16,700, and it gives me 265,043. So that's my total purchases. Very last thing in the question is we're always told that we take from stock. So we took from goods, we took from purchases of €100 a week, and we looked at that up here. Every week I took from purchases of 5,200, so I reduced my purchases. So in order to get my purchases figure here, this is my net purchases. In order to get that, I'd have had to take away €100 per week, and we could work that out over the course of the year to being €5,200. So what was my purchases before I took away the drawings? So again, my purchases at the end of the year, I'm just showing it here in notes just to make it kind of fit this format. So 265,043 is my purchases at the end of the year. I know that I took away, I had my purchases before that, I took away my drawings, and this is the figure I had. So let's do the reverse. Let's take the 265 and 43, let's add the 5,200, and this would be my purchases before I took away drawings. Last figure to calculate is 270,243. So that's my purchases before I took away drawings. Again, double check it doesn't make sense. 270,243 minus 5,200, and it should be equal to that, and it is. Again, check this one doesn't make sense. 16,700 plus 265,043, 281743, does it make sense? Yes, it does. So all I've done is I've started with my balance sheet, I've gone to my P&L, I figured out the things that I could, opening stock, closing stock, I added this here, put in my total expenses figures and got it here, and then I just put in my net profit. After that, it just became of working your way up to gross profit. I figured out that gross profit is 40% of sales, so get divided by 40, multiplied by 100, and then I just filled in the few missing figures at the end, and I managed to figure out my purchases figure so that I finished my P&L. This is the incomplete J. O'Higgins. It's the balance sheet method for incomplete records from 2003. Thanks for listening.